Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Dux-Soup webinar, Dux-Soup Turbo and Salesforce CRM integration. Giles Garnett, the head of professional services, will be presenting this webinar. Live chat is monitored by Jin, the head of customer support, and at the end of the webinar, we will have Q&A with Giles. Thank you for joining us today, and let's start our webinar.
Hello and good morning, good afternoon or good evening to you all, wherever you may be, and welcome to this week's Dux-Soup webinar. My name is Giles Garnett and I'm Head of Professional Services here at Dux-Soup, and as well as presenting the webinar program, I also run the booster and technical calls, as well as some of the support calls, so I have direct interaction with many Dux-Soup users. Jin, my colleague who you've just heard from, is our Head of Customer Support, and she'll be monitoring and answering as many of your questions as she can on the chat while I'm presenting. Please do try and keep the questions on topic so that they are useful for the whole audience. If you have other questions, you can always visit our support pages where there's a live chat option and you can connect with our support team there. Now, today we're going to demonstrate a custom integration between Dux-Soup and the Salesforce platform. And I'll come on to why we're doing this in a second, but we're only going to be focusing on Zapier and the webhook functionality. The reason for that is because when we looked at this in relation to Integromat, you need a very high level of subscription to Salesforce. I can go into that in more detail maybe during the Q&A at the end, but we'll be focusing today on Zapier and webhooks. And what I'm going to demonstrate today can actually be applied to many other CRMs. But with Salesforce being positioned as one of the largest CRMs with more than 150,000 companies across the world making use of this platform, we decided to have the focus on this platform for today. Now, please be aware that what I'm going to walk through today is a fairly complex process. And the point here is I'm going to be able to show you how to build an integration that automates a lot of data transactions between the platforms. And therefore, you want it to be as complete and as robust as possible from the start. So you need a good basis from which to build on. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website for you to view. And if you registered, you will also get a direct link to the recording. Very briefly, for anyone who's new to Dux-Soup, perhaps we have some Salesforce users on the line who are not so familiar with Dux-Soup. Dux-Soup, when used in conjunction with LinkedIn, can help you to automate your LinkedIn lead generation activities. It can help you to send auto invites with personalized messages. You can search, filter, and target individuals with Dux-Soup tags. You can automatically message first-degree connections during auto visits. You can download your data as well in CSV format. And with Turbo, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, so that's the Dux-Soup Turbo product, you can send automated follow-up messages to new connections. You can have stats tracking through our funnel, through the Dux Dash, and then integrations with other systems, as we are going to demonstrate today with Salesforce. Now, in order to make absolute best use of this custom integration, there are a couple of things that you can do, first of all, within Salesforce in order to make this as straightforward as possible. And what we need to do is consider what data we're bringing across from LinkedIn and how we can therefore minimize the chances of duplicates and have as clean a data set as possible. For anyone who's been using Dux-Soup and has used webhooks, you will know that there are two bits of data that are really useful in this, and that's the LinkedIn ID and the LinkedIn URL. Now, within the default Salesforce data fields, there's nowhere obvious to put this data. So as part of this demo at the start, I'll walk you through how to add these custom fields to your Salesforce environment. And once I've done our Salesforce preparation, I'll then show you how to build up in today's demo 3 zaps, which you can customize to your heart's content, of course, but I will give you the basis from which you can then build on. And what the 3 zaps we're going to cover today will basically show you how to add existing LinkedIn connections, first-degree connections to your Salesforce contacts, any LinkedIn profile views that you carry out to your Salesforce contacts, how to automatically add new LinkedIn connections to your Salesforce contacts, and finally, how to have an incoming LinkedIn message appear as a task within your Salesforce environment. So very briefly, that's today's agenda. Let's get on with what we're actually going to try and do today. So hopefully everyone can see my screen, and what I've done here is I've set up a trial Salesforce environment. It's just all the default settings, and that's what I have here. And I've gone into my Salesforce account and I've just gone to my contacts and listed all my contacts here. I want to now set up my custom fields for our LinkedIn ID and our LinkedIn URL, two very key bits of data that we capture during Dux-Soup transactions within LinkedIn. So what I can do then from within the contact screen here is if I go up to the right-hand side here into this little cog, the setup cog here, and if I now click the edit object, that will open me a new tab here. And from within this environment here, I can now go over to the left-hand side and look at the fields and relationships part. And this here lists all of the different fields and the relationships between them that are available within the contact object manager. So I want to create two new fields. So over on the right-hand side here, I've got the option to create a new field. So I will select that option. And now I can choose what type of data I want to have in that field. Now I know that a LinkedIn ID is a mixture of it's both text and numerical. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go text here, set up a combination of letters and numbers, and I'll press the next button. And now I'm going to give this a field, this field a label. And in this case, I'm going to call this LinkedIn ID. And that will then automatically populate the field name here. And I need to enter a maximum length for the text field. In this case, then 20 characters would be plenty. We'll do that. We'll press the next button. And now I have the ability to define who within my CRM environment, within my Salesforce environment, can view this information. I'm just going to leave this as default, press next. And then here I have the opportunity to make sure that this information appears in my data that I see when I look at a contact. So I'm going to press save there, and I've now created my LinkedIn ID field. If we go down here, we can see now that's listed here in my fields. I'll now create a second one, and this is where I want to capture the LinkedIn URL. And as that implies that it would make sense to use the URL field here at the bottom. So I can add any valid website address. So I'm going to click on the URL here. Similarly, press next. Give this also a field name. That'll be linked in URL. There we go. Automatically populate the field name there. I could add a description if I wanted, but that's not necessary in this case. Press next. Again, the authority levels of authority. Press next. Also have that appear within my contact layout. Press save. And if I now look at the different fields here, I can see here I've got both LinkedIn ID and LinkedIn URL created as my custom fields within my contact object manager. Excellent. So we've done our groundwork. We've now got that information available. And if I click on just a sample contact now here, we can now see, if I look at the details of this contact, I can see here that those fields, LinkedIn ID and LinkedIn URL, have been created and could be populated accordingly. So that's good. Let's go back to our contacts list. There we are, there's our contacts. Okay, now what may also be interesting here then is in this default display here to maybe change some of the aspects of this. And what you can do here is, again here where you've got the little cog here, you can select the fields to display. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to choose the LinkedIn URL as a useful one to see. So I'm going to add that to my default view. There we go. We'll press save. And there we are. I now have a column where I would be able to see the URL of the individual as and when they get imported into Salesforce. So those are my 3 bits of preparatory work done now within Salesforce. What I want to do now is start building some zaps in order to have some data come from LinkedIn. For anybody who's not familiar with Zapier, go to zapier.com and you can create a free account there. You have limited functionality and capacity with a free account, but there are various different tiers of Zapier. What I'm going to do now is here within Zapier, I'm going to create a Zap in order to build my integration here with Salesforce. I click on create new Zap, and first thing I'm going to do is name my Zap. So here we will put visits. Oh no, we'll put here first degree connections to Salesforce. So I'm going to have first degree connections being added to my Salesforce environment. Save that. So now in order to get this to work with Dux-Soup, we have our Dux-Soup icon up here. I need to open my Dux-Soup options. So I'll click on my Dux-Soup icon here. Up in the top right hand corner, I have the options here. If the Dux-Soup icon is turquoise, that means you've got turbo. If you don't have turbo, you may have the pro version, which is red. You would need to upgrade to turbo for this functionality to work. But if I go to my Dux-Soup options, and then here within my options, if I go along to my Connect tab, this here is where I can define my webhook activities. So I'll get rid of that one that I was testing earlier. If we go back to Zapier now, and I now say, right, I want to use the webhook functionality within Zapier to create this link between the two bits, between the two environments. My trigger event here will be a catch hook. Hopefully most of you are familiar with some of this terminology. I can always address some of the questions during the Q&A towards the end. Hopefully most of you are familiar with that anyway. You've maybe seen some of our previous demos or webinars. Press continue here. And that then creates me a unique URL, where my custom URL here, where my data will be sent to. So I'm going to copy that URL and paste that into my webhook options here in my Dux-Soup environment. Now, all I'm interested in this activity here is visit activities, visit events, I should say. So I'm only going to have visit event data sent to this webhook. We've done that. I'm going to press continue within Zapier. And now I want to test the trigger. So I'm going to have some sample data sent from here to Zapier or to this webhook. So if I press send some sample data, I'm going to press OK there, and it sends some sample data across. And I press my test trigger, and hopefully we now have some sample data arrived. There we go. So we see here I've got two lots of data arrive. Now there's a reason for that. You'll notice there's a difference between request A and request B. Request A is a create event. Request B is an update event. There's two phases that Dux-Soup goes through when it's capturing data during an auto visit in standard LinkedIn. And the information that you're probably most interested in is that along the lines of the extended contact information, the email address, etc. And that arrives in the update event. So now we've got some sample data here. I'm going to press continue. There we go. And now I want to, here, my next step is that I want to add a filter to this. The reason I want to add a filter here is because I don't want to add every profile view that I carry out. I'm only interested here in first degree connections. So what I can do here is now add a filter along those lines. If I go to my catch hook data and I say, well, I'm only interested in people who are a first degree connection. So if in this case, if I look at my data degree field here, data degree is first. So, okay, I'm only going to look at people who have got a number 1 within that field, because those are the only people I'm actually interested in getting their details for into my CRM. Now, for you, you may want to, for example, set up this to capture all visits, in which case you wouldn't need to put this filter in there, but that's very much a personal decision depending on what your requirements are with your data within your CRM. I'm also going to add here, I'm only interested in events that are the updates, because that's where I'm going to capture, for example, email addresses. So I'm going to click on the event here, and I'm going to say exactly matches, in this case, update. We'll press continue. And as you can see here, with the test data I've got, my Zap would have continued. Excellent. So that's our first phase done with regards to that activity. Now we want to link this to Salesforce. So if I now here within Zapier, if I now type in Salesforce, we can see here that Salesforce has the integration with Zapier. So I can now here choose an event to occur based upon the data that's coming in. And what I'm going to do here is rather than creating a new record every time I carry out a visit, what I want to do is actually find a record and then optionally create one if none are found, because otherwise I'm going to, every time I carry out a visit, I'm just going to end up with duplicate data all the time. So I'm going to do the find a record. Press continue. Now I would link my Salesforce account. Basically, there's an authentication step to go through there. I've already linked mine. So I have a Salesforce, my Salesforce account that I've got here set up. Press continue. And now I need to set up my action. Now within Salesforce, the object that I'm looking at here is actually the contact. If you remember there, we were looking at the contact information. Sorry, talking and typing is not my strong point. So we're going to look at the contact object here. And now we need to choose our field to search by. Now this is where we come back to our LinkedIn ID that we were talking about earlier. Here, my field to search by, if I look down through this list here, and if I type in LinkedIn, you can see here it's picked up my custom fields from my account. I'm going to do a search by LinkedIn ID. That's our unique identifier against our LinkedIn contacts. And the search value I need to match it up to comes from our original catch hook. So we go back to our catch hook here. And if we look at the data here that comes through from there, I go straight down to the bottom because I know it's there. It's this field here, the data ID field, this one here. So I'm going to search for that value. And then if the record doesn't exist, I want to create a new record. So this is where I can now define all of the fields that I want to within Salesforce and have all of that data populated for my original webhook. The accounts that would normally be linked to the organization they work for. I'm not going to go into detail with that because I think we've got plenty to cover here, but you could basically carry out a search step there and create a new organization within a new account within your CRM in that stage. But what I'm going to do here is very quickly focus on the data that's interesting. So I'm going to look here for last name. So we'll map that data across. There we are, last name and first name. There we go, first name, salutation. Now let's find the interesting ones now. Mailing street, what we could use there is the location data here. So there we are, data location, that comes out of LinkedIn. We'll go a bit further down and find some other. We could put phone in there. Interesting one here would be email. So we'll go to our catch hook here and look for the email field. There we go, there's that one. And we could enter job title, etc., all sorts of other things. And down here are two custom fields, which are really important. Our LinkedIn ID, that comes from the very bottom. There we go, that's that one. And then our LinkedIn URL. Again, we go to our options here. And I'm going through this fairly quickly. I'm just conscious of time. This could go on a while. So there we go. So there we are. We've now got some data there to put in there against that particular contact. If I now press continue and test and continue, searching for or creating a record, we should now see, if we go up to our Salesforce environment, if I refresh this, what we should see now is Jan Janssen appear there within my contacts. So there we are, there's my new contact there. Now I've got set it just as myself as the owner there. You can change all of those settings as well. I've only put minimal information in there. But if we now open Jan Janssen here, within here, if I look at the details, we can see the information there that's come through from that sample data that we set out. If I now go back here and I turn this Zap on, there we go. No, we don't want to copy the link for that one. So we've turned that Zap on. If I now carry out some auto visits to some first degree connections within LinkedIn, we should start to see some data being populated here within my contacts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my my LinkedIn page. Now, as always, if you're new to these webinars, feel free to connect with myself. I'm always happy to connect with Dux-Soup users or people with an interest in this sort of technology. So feel free to send me a connection request. I'm here on LinkedIn. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my network here, go to my first degree connections. Let's wait for this to load up. I'm just going to search with filters just so I've got a short list of first degree connections. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to carry out a handful of auto visits, just make sure I've got all of my options turned off. There we go. There we go. I'm just going to do that. Let's set the robot off to visit out a handful of first degree connections. If I press the visit profiles here, that should be fine. And what we should see now is Dux-Soup will auto visit some of my first degree connections, and those people will then appear here within my Salesforce environment. So we'll just leave that to run for a few minutes while I continue talking. Okay, so we've done our first zap there to collect people from visit activities. We go back now and we'll now start setting up our second zap, and this will be to collect message data. There are different types of data that we can collect during these activities. What I'm going to do is collect some message data now so that we can create a task against a profile within a contact within Salesforce. So similar to the last time, we're going to go here and we're going to do messages to Salesforce. What we'll do now is we'll also go use the webhook functionality, exactly the same starting activity as the first zap. We'll do the catch hook, we'll press continue. I will copy the URL here to my Dux-Soup options, and I'm going quite quickly. You'll be able to watch this on the recording. If I go now, and I'm only interested in message data this time. The first one was for visit events. Now we're interested in message events. We'll press continue there. And once again, we need to test the trigger. So we'll test that, send some sample data across. Press OK. There we go. Hopefully we now have some test data come through. There we go. And again, we get 2 lots of data. So the reason for that is because we get 2 different types of message data. We get member to member, which is people messaging you, or we get here invitation accept. And if I have time towards the end, I'll show you what you can do with the invitation accept data as well. We'll use the member to member message here in order to make this as straightforward as possible. And because I'm using that data ID number, do you remember that data ID number that I created at the beginning? This ID number here. I'm going to just create a contact within my Salesforce environment with that data ID number so that this message then appears against their details. If I go to my all contacts and I've got this guy here, Rodrigo, and I'm going to go to his details and I'm just going to add that LinkedIn ID in here. There we go. And I'll press save. So this guy's now got a LinkedIn ID, which should match up to the sample data that I'm going to send through shortly. There we go. If I now refresh this, there we are. I now can see a number of my first degree connections are appearing here within my LinkedIn environment, from my LinkedIn environment. So from the auto visits I'm carrying out in LinkedIn, those people's details are now appearing here within Salesforce. So I'll now stop the robot so we don't carry out too many visits. There we go, just while I'm doing other things as well. But if I wanted to populate all of my information from my first degree connections into Salesforce, I just need to carry out auto visits like that and build up my database of information against them. So I've got my sample message data here. We'll press continue. And like we did last time, we're going to add a filter here to make sure we're only going to process the correct message data. Click on here and we're going to look for message received events. So the event is going to be a message received event. Exactly matches received. There we go. And we're also going to say we're only interested in the types of messages that come in that are member to member. So the message type has to exactly match. And here we'll do member to member. As so. Press continue. We should get the green light here to say, yes, your zap would have continued. That's great news. Cool. So now we need to do our Salesforce activity. Salesforce, there we go. And this is where we want to first of all do a lookup to make sure that the person whose message just exists within our environment, and then add the message as a task against that individual. So what we'll do here is, first of all, we're going to find a record. So we're going to do the same thing as we did before with regards to looking up their ID. Choose your accounts. This is where you make sure you have the correct Salesforce account linked. There we go. So here we're looking at, again, we're looking for the contact, because it's all based around the contact information. There we go, contact information. And the field to search by is, once again, if you remember what we put in there before, we're going to look for the LinkedIn ID again. And the search value this time, it comes from our original catch hook information here. And this time it comes from the data from ID. So it's the ID that this data has come from. There we go. And that's the one that we put in there earlier. We're not going to create a new record if it doesn't exist yet, because we don't have enough information here to do that. Press OK. Test and continue. We should get a positive result there. There we are. Our test was successful. So it was able to find this person here that we added that information to. So we'll close that one. And now what we want to do is create a new task within Salesforce. So similarly here, a new task against the correct person in Salesforce, which is really important. So again, Salesforce, and what we're doing here is we are creating a record again. Press continue. Again, going through the add the correct account. Press continue. Feels like it's doing the same thing again and again and again. It's unfortunate that you can't just link the one all the way through. And this is where, under the Salesforce object we want to do here, we want to actually create a new task. Right, so this is where we need to then say, who is this task related to? And what we do here is we go to custom and we go back to the result of our search that we carried out shortly previously. We'll use this one here. We go for the result of that. That should then, oops, we did that twice, didn't mean to do that. There we go. It comes dynamically then from the previous step. And we can now say, right, what do we want it to call it? Well, we want to call this as an incoming LinkedIn message. LinkedIn message. There we go. So this is a LinkedIn message coming in. You could add all sorts of other bits and pieces here, depending on what you want. Well, what you can do here is say, right, let's take the original data that comes in a message. Where's the message? There we are. There's the text. What you could also do here is, for example, also add the URL of the message as well. So just to be able to illustrate that, I'm going to put the text of the message and the URL. I'm not going to add any further fields in there. You could add all sorts of stuff in there. I'm going to press continue then. Let's test and continue. And we should then see a new task appear within our Salesforce environment. There we are, a record is just sent to Salesforce. So let's go back to Salesforce here. And we go now to our task view. So along the top here, this is the default view. We go to our tasks. And what we should see here now is, there we go. We've got a LinkedIn message come from this chap here, from Rodrigo. And there's the message that he sent to me. And there indeed is the URL that takes me directly to the message if I wanted to. Similarly, if I go back to my contacts, and I go to this individual here, so we go to Rodrigo here, and I look over here, I have my link to my task here as well. Now, I didn't put a due date or anything in there at all, but that's how you can therefore make sure that that task is appearing against the correct contact by using that absolutely key LinkedIn ID number. So those are two of the basic things there. what you can also do now, as you can see, as I've been carrying out these auto visits, I've asked Dux-Soup to gather the LinkedIn URL. If I wanted to update the information against these people here, I can go straight to their LinkedIn profile from this column here, which is really handy. So I can just click on that and that would take me directly to the individual's URL. Now, one further final step, which may be of use for when using this, is that as people join your network, you want to trigger Dux-Soup to carry out an auto view of their profile so that those people, as they become first degree connections, then get populated in your CRM. So let's create our third and final, very brief Zap. I didn't turn that one on, but that's okay. I'm not gonna run that one for now. If I now, just for a very quick one, create a Zap here, and this is to show you how to trigger a remote control action in order to carry out what we call an auto visit. Again, we're going to use the Webhook functionality. We're going to use exactly the same catch hook data, and this time we'll take that and we'll also create a second one here. Again, looking out for message data. That's because when somebody becomes a first degree connection, let's press continue there. When somebody becomes a first degree connection, you get a notification through a message event. So we'll send that sample data through there. We'll call this one new connections. Now, I could overcomplicate this and build this using paths and much more complicated. For now, I'm going to keep this separate. We'll get our test data through. And this is the data we're looking for, this invitation accept data. Remember we had two samples of data. We've got the member to member type message and the invitation accept date type message. We'll use the invitation accept data. We'll go and build our filter here to only continue when the data type is invitation accept. Exactly matches invitation accept. There we go. Press continue. Excellent. We'll close that. And now what we want to do is we want to ask Dux-Soup to carry out an auto visit to that profile. So here we can then go to the Dux-Soup integration here within Zapier, and we want to trigger an auto visit, create and send a visit command here. There we go. Now we would then need to add our Dux-Soup account credentials, and where you find those are here within your Dux-Soup environment under the Connect tab, down towards the bottom here under Remote Control, under the Connect tab here. These here are your credentials for triggering remote control activities. So you'd need to put those credentials into Zapier here in order for that to be linked to your account. So let's find my account there. There we go. I'll press continue there. As you saw just now, I've turned on my remote control activity here. So now I need to tell Zapier, or tell the remote control, what URL I want to visit. So this person, I've had a notification that I've got a new connection, new first degree connection. I can now say, right, from that catch hook data, if I show all the options here, I can see that that information has come from this URL here. So that's the URL that I want to carry out my auto visit to. If I now press continue, I can then press test and continue, and what we should see then is Dux-Soup automatically carrying out an auto visit to that particular URL. If I press test and continue, it's sending that command. We should see, there we go, it's opened that URL there, it's opened this particular profile and carrying out that auto visit. And now I could then turn this one on, and as Dux-Soup picks up new connections, it would carry out that auto visit. Basically, if I had everything else turned on as well, then all of that data would be automatically populated within my Salesforce environment. In order for that all to work seamlessly, you also need to have the webhook functionality turned on, the message bridge functionality turned on, and the remote control activity turned on. The message bridge is the part that listens for new messages coming in to both your regular mailbox and your Sales Navigator mailbox, but it also listens out for new first degree connections, so people who are accepting your invitations or becoming first degree connections. So enable those three options, and then you should be fully up and running with this particular integration. And what we've demonstrated there is then how to bring people into your contact database within Salesforce, how to have this data visible, so actually make use of the data that's coming from LinkedIn to make sure you're building a unique database and not ending up with lots of duplicates, how to search for records and make sure you're not ending up with duplicates, how to create tasks based upon incoming messages and link them back to the correct contact as well, and then also to how to populate automatically as people join your network. That's everything that I wanted to present today. So I think we should probably move on to questions.
Yes, thank you for the webinar. At the moment, I'm not seeing any questions.
Stunned silence, potentially. Maybe I know I went through that quite quickly. There's a lot of information there to go through. There's a lot of steps. Hopefully it's useful information for you to be able to, depending on what CRM you're using. In this case, we've looked at Salesforce, but exactly the same principles can be used against almost every single CRM. Any CRM that you can add your own custom fields to. I mean, I've worked with HubSpot in a similar way. I've worked with Zoho in a similar way. All kinds of different environments. You can build your own fields as long as they've got an integration with either Zapier or Integromat. You can do exactly the same, and the possibilities are almost endless for being able to build up your own integration there. Hopefully what I've been able to demonstrate here is sort of the principles, the correct workflow to go through there. And every CRM has slightly different terminology. So here we're talking about tasks. In Pipedrive, for example, I think you're talking about activities, but you can use the different terminologies and they're interchangeable. And hopefully, depending on what environment you're working in, what environment you're most familiar with, you should be able to use the same principles against different CRMs. Anything coming at all, Jin, while I was just prattling on?
Just people asking if the webinar is going to be available.
Of course it will be, yeah. As always, our webinars are recorded. They will be available in the next, I think it's around 24 hours it usually takes. Certainly by Thursday at the latest, it should be available on our website, on our YouTube channel, and you will also receive a direct link to it if you have registered for the webinar. But yes, all of our webinars are backed up with that. There was also a blog post. There will also be a blog post published on our pages around that. So keep an eye on that. So there'll be a step-by-step explanation of all of this, including how to build those custom fields within the CRM. That will all be documented within the blog post. So that's already almost ready to be published. So as always, we'll be providing that as well. Okay, well, if there's no further questions, I'll continue. Just feel free to interrupt, Jin, if anything comes in.
Yes,
Think, oh, yes.
I have one question now.
Excellent.
So a user is asking, what's the difference between the first and the third automation, and why remote control visit using Dux-Soup if you already have this revisit enabled with Turbo?
Okay, so if you've got Turbo and you are, if you don't have the auto visit enabled, I'm falling over my words. I apologize. I'll start again. So the first Zap that I built was to capture events from first degree visits. So visits of your first degree connections. Of course, your network is dynamic. It will be changing. You will be building your network, I expect. You'll be growing your network. So you'll have continually new people coming into your network, and you want those people to also go into your CRM. So you probably build up a baseline. So maybe from today, for example, you maybe want to carry out a revisit to all of your first degree connections over the coming days, doing so many per day, getting all of that information into Salesforce. But from now on, all of those new people that come in, you want them also to go into your CRM. So therefore, as you get notified, as you receive those acceptances into your LinkedIn environment, you can then automate that revisit activity to make sure that you capture their information. When you visit them as a second or third degree connection, you only get limited information, of course, depending on their privacy settings. When they become a first degree connection, that's when they become most interesting from a database point of view, because you can usually see more extensive information. So you can see maybe the email address, contact telephone numbers, and further information. So first degree, carrying out an auto visit to your new first degree connections means that you would then get the as full amount of data as possible to those new connections. And it's about that auto visit step that I displayed at the end there. Would then, you'd carry out the auto visit, and then the first step would be used to actually populate the data. I think that I've explained that properly. Anything else, Jim?
I just wanted to clarify for everyone that we have a direct Pipedrive integration. So if you're using Pipedrive, you don't need to use Zapier or Integromat.
Yep, that's a very good point. I know there are a number of people who use a combination of Zapier, Pipedrive, and Google Sheets and all sorts in order to enhance and further populate external data into their databases. So yeah, we see some power users who are using a combination of all sorts of different ways of doing things. So yes, but we do have that direct integration with Pipedrive, and during the course of this year, we're expecting to be releasing further direct integrations with other CRMs in a very similar way to the way that the Pipedrive integration works now. Okay, for next time, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be doing a bit of a Dux-Soup Turbo refresher, including something that we're incredibly excited about and will be available very shortly to all of our Turbo users. Let me just check something. So in the coming hours, very soon anyway, we're going to be releasing version 7.6. And as part of version 7.6, we are releasing our multiple drip campaigns feature. It's been a much requested feature over the last period through our feedback pages. And so in 2 weeks' time, I will be going through how to configure multiple drip campaigns, how all of that works. There's a little bit of a change to some of the interface there with regards your follow-up campaigns. So that's something to really put in your diary. Make sure you get registered for that one. It'll be again live interactive demo showing how the configuration works, but we're expecting the release almost in the coming hours of that version. And yeah, everything will work as before with your existing campaigns, of course, with your existing follow-up campaign, but then you will now be able to add additional campaigns to run in parallel. So we're very excited about that one. As always, I will promote the booster and technical calls. The booster sessions are designed for beginners, for starters who are new to Dux-Soup, who perhaps want more information and to familiarize themselves with the platform. Technical sessions, I would work with you in order to help build your process and maybe build a solution similar to the one I've demonstrated here. Send as much information as you want through when you place your booking, and we can make sure that hour is tailored to your requirements. Our useful links page, as always, our home page, our blog posts, the webinars, the tutorials through the YouTube channel, our support page where you will find the live chat facility with our fabulous support team, and of course our very active Facebook page where there's obviously always quite a lot of interesting discussion and people raising questions, etc. So yes, it's a very healthy community. That's all I've got for now. I will hand back to Jin to close off and speak to you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much to Giles, and thank you everyone for attending. I hope to see you in our next webinar. Bye.